And this is the absolute paradox we're living inside right now.
It is.
On one hand, the world is demanding hyper-spontaneous, flexible travel. We want to work remotely from, I don't know, a cafe in Cusco this week.
Yeah.
And then, without any rigid planning, just book a flight to some hidden island in the Azores next week. Our entire life experience, thanks to digital tools and remote work, is optimized for instant adaptability.
And yet, if you look at where the global money is moving, specifically government and mega corporate capital, they are simultaneously betting trillions of dollars on infrastructure projects that are absolutely rigid.
Completely rigid.
These projects are locked into decade-long timelines and fundamentally assume that by the year, 2038, the human need for movement will still be dictated by mandated choke points that they control.
It's the ultimate structural tension. We are witnessing the death spiral of the centralized consumer culture, the Las Vegas model, the fixed, inauthentic experience.
While the infrastructure machine is trying to predict and ultimately monetize the winner of the battle for the traveler's soul.
Right. Will we choose genuine cultural depth or completely unfettered escape?
And that's the mission statement for this deep dive. We are examining these two parallel realities in 2025. The total collapse of the old mass experience model and the monstrous $54 billion financial ambition of the projects being built right now to replace it. Projects that, may already be irrelevant by the time they're even completed.
Okay, so we have to start with the failure of the old model, and there's no better microcosm than Las Vegas.
Not at all.
It represents that singular, highly centralized consumer culture experience that is now, it's faltering. When you look at the official narrative of decline, the hard data from the tourism agencies, it's rough.
It's really rough. They said a 14% revenue drop in the first quarter of the year, with overall year-to-date volume down 7%.
And the accepted explanation is always just a shrug,
Oh, well, gambling is less unique because other states legalized it.
Or, prices are just too high. They use that phrase, the corporate greed conundrum.
It's a convenient label, for sure, but it completely fails to address the structural shifts that fundamentally broke the contract Vegas had with its consumer base.
Okay, let's unpack that contract, because Vegas was built on a very specific structural incentive.
It was.
The casino would entice you in with free or, cheap amenities, free parking, cheap drinks, those loss leader buffets,
Right.
relying on volume and time spent on the floor to make their profits at the high-stakes tables or the expensive nightclubs. It was a structural trade-off.
A trade-off they completely abandoned. The shift from free to charged parking is the perfect, physical manifestation of this broken contract.
Absolutely.
I remember when every single casino had ample free parking, often validated. Now it's standard. You pay per day.
Yeah.
It's a nickel and dime mentality that fundamentally signals to the customer, we are monetizing the basic act of your arrival.
Locals absolutely point to this as the ultimate symptom of corporate greed, and they are right.
Of course they are.
Because it changes the whole psychological calculus. When you arrive, you're no longer feeling welcomed. You're immediately calculating the sunk cost of just having your vehicle on their property. This initial transactional friction, it just diminishes the vibe before you even step foot inside the casino.
And the corporations did this across the board, not just parking. They cut back on ambient entertainment. They reduced comps. They drove up the resort fees. They treated the customer base not as an asset to be nurtured, but as a resource to be rapidly extracted.
But that's only one part of the financial fissure. We have to trace the impact of international factors, too.
Yeah, that's where the political climate really hits the bottom line.
Right. International tourism is reportedly down substantially, particularly among our closest neighbors, the Canadians.
And it's killing border towns and key destinations like Vegas. So many Canadians are actively avoiding the U.S. And the question is why?
Well, it comes down to political tension, fear of U.S. customs and immigration enforcement, ICE, and a generalized sense of political hostility.
And think about it. If the psychological goal of a trip is escape, that goal is instantly destroyed when the destination itself generates anxiety or fear of authority.
You can't. You cannot overcome genuine political risk and hostility with a few slot machines.
No way. And then you layer on the currency exchange, and it just becomes a financial non-starter for so many people.
Right. One traveler pointed out that a seemingly expensive, what was it, a $60 burger meal, which is already insane,
Already crazy.
instantly becomes an $83 Canadian price tag. That's a massive barrier to entry that Vegas, unlike, say, Disneyland or a true cultural destination, it simply cannot justify it because the experience itself is now perceived as compromised.
And this is exactly how the system cannibalizes its own volume.
Yes.
If costs rise, fewer people come. The corporations, desperate to maintain margins, respond with cost-cutting.
Cheaper service, reduced maintenance.
Dilly-dallying, less free entertainment, which results in a demonstrably worse experience.
Yeah.
That feeds back into fewer people, which forces more cost-cutting. It's an unstoppable downward spiral of quality.
And we see that quality collapse reflected in the physical spaces. The magic is gone. Vegas used to offer the ultimate in manufactured escapism, but now the manufactured aspect is just too obvious, too cynical.
I read this traveler anecdote about visiting Excalibur, which, used to be this genuinely fun, cheesy destination in the 90s.
Sure.
Now, they described it as feeling fundamentally different, noting the architecture itself had changed, becoming a literal funnel from MGM to the various scammy tourist traps.
Wow.
The design is no longer about ambiance or leisure. It's about directing foot traffic quickly to a point of transaction.
That's the architecture of desperation. It's why you see the rise of these aggressive, unauthentic experiences. Street performers are no longer just ambient. They're getting up in my face to demand money. The ambient entertainment that used to be a free gift has been replaced by desperate, high-friction, visible transactions. The cynicism is just, it's visible on the street corners.
And because Vegas stopped being unique, the customer base bifurcated. It split. The high-stakes gamblers who are seeking maximum financial return, they shifted their entire business to places like Macau, where the margins and perceived risk are better.
And the families and the amusement seekers who want a pure, clean experience?
They went to Disneyland.
Exactly. They went to places like Disneyland. Vegas is left awkwardly stuck in the middle, trying to be a high-roller destination and a cheap family fun park, and it's failing to commit to either.
Yeah. The core gimmick gambling is now an afterthought, lost in this maze of mandatory fees and aggressive monetization pathways.
It was the quintessential monoculture experience, and that monoculture has fractured, leaving a void.
So if the highly commercialized, inauthentic, centralized Vegas model is collapsing, where is that traveler's soul going?
Right.
The fracture we were just talking about has resulted in two radical and yet, I think, structurally similar destinations.
Right.
The path of deep cultural connection and the path of total unfettered psychological freedom.
And both are radical rejections of the Vegas model. And the data totally confirms this consumer pivot toward purposeful travel. People still intend to increase their spending on leisure travel.
The money's there.
The money is there. The average expected increase is still around 9%, but they're prioritizing value and utility over traditional loyalty points. They want the trip to do something for them, not just, accumulate airline miles.
The motivation is fundamentally changed, especially for younger travelers. The focus is no longer on simply escaping work, but enriching life. Adventure leads the pack at 39%, wellness is close behind at 36%, and culinary experiences at 34%.
But the critical metric is cultural immersion, prioritized by nearly 1 in 3 young travelers. Gen Z, millennials, this is what they want.
This is the anti-Vegas.
Totally.
This is the deliberate search for authenticity and depth. You don't find that depth at the Bellagio Fountain Show. You find it in places like Cusco, Peru.
Right. Cusco is now seen as the definitive gateway to the deep Andean culture, where you can participate in traditional weaving workshops, learning skills passed down through generations.
And you see that seamless, challenging mix of Inca and Spanish colonial history woven directly into the city's architecture. It's right there.
Or consider Havana, Cuba. Travelers there aren't looking for all-inclusive resorts.
No.
They're visiting cigar factories to understand the craft, deeply engaging with the history of the revolution, and, participating in the simple ritual of watching the sunset at the Malecon with locals.
These are not polished corporate theme parks. They are places with layers, complexity, and history that demand engagement from you.
And the traveler is demanding guides who reflect that authenticity. We have data showing an 89% preference for knowledgeable, local subject matter experts over influencers.
That is a massive trust signal. It's huge.
They are done with the branded middleman. They want the truth directly from the source, the person who lives and breathes that culture. They want the utility of knowledge.
That yearning for the genuine, for the real, it leads us down the other extreme path. Okay. If the first choice is deep cultural connection, The second is total unfettered psychological freedom, the ultimate escape from judgment and corporate constraints, and that is found in the hedonic liberation space.
We were talking about sex resorts, which represent the pinnacle of this pure adults-only escape.
Exactly. Places like Hedonism the Second in Jamaica or Desire Resort Riviera Maya in Mexico, they are adults only, all-inclusive, and the dress code ranges from clothing optional to completely nude.
What's fascinating isn't the nudity or the physical liberation itself, but the psychological contract they offer you.
Yes, they are an escape from the moral judgment and the suffocating commercial constraints of traditional society. Vegas charges you $60 for a burger and demands you conform.
Right.
These resorts offer a space where the rules are clear, adults only, private, consensual, and the stated goal is psychological decompression.
You mentioned the rules, and it's important to note the official line, no public sex acts.
Right, that's the official line.
But those who visit acknowledge that the reality is often different, saying it can happen often right in front of you, behind you, or even next to you.
Which points not to anarchy, but to a profound blurring of boundaries, built on the mutual understanding that everyone there is seeking a specific form of total freedom.
And critically, this experience is often tailored specifically to marginalized communities and niche interests.
That's a huge part of it. Hedonism the Second, for example, hosts special weeks geared toward LGBTQ+ groups, threesomes, and millennials, seeking a very specific social dynamic.
They carve out spaces like the Romping Shop Playroom, which is designated for couples, single women, and invited single guys.
This isn't just generic hedonism, it's targeted, institutionalized freedom. It's a space where people can explore their identities, sexual, social, psychological, without fear of the judgment that created the political climate and corporate structure that failed them in Vegas.
It's authenticity sought through physical and sexual liberation.
And the common thread in both the Cusco path and the hedonism path is the demand for something real and personalized that the monolithic corporate system failed to provide.
And crucially, both are fundamentally spontaneous and adaptable. You book your flight now, you go now. You don't put a down payment on a cultural experience that might be ready in 15 years.
And that contrasts spontaneity versus the fixed 15-year timeline is the perfect bridge to our next section, which details the ultimate structural bet on predictability.
So we shift now from the collapsing consumer model to the massive structural bet being made by the state and federal governments in California. We're looking at the California High-Speed Rail, or CHSR, which is the ultimate antithesis to spontaneous adaptable travel. This project assumes predictability over the next 2 decades.
It is colossal in scope and ambition. The focus is on the Gilroy to Palmdale segment, which is the key connective tissue linking Northern and Southern California.
And that segment alone is estimated to cost an astronomical $54.4 billion.
Billion, with a B.
With the current goal set for operation by early 2038. This is a project that defines long-term rigidity.
Absolutely.
Now, the official narrative justifying this immense cost is pure climate mobility. They project that this rail system, powered by 100% renewable energy, will eliminate over 100 million tons of GHG emissions by shifting travelers from congested roads and air travel to trains.
And they have real-world examples to back up the social justice aspect of that green mandate. They point to completed works like the Tulare Street undercrossing in Fresno's historic Chinatown.
Okay.
That project, part of the rail construction, specifically reduces unhealthy pollutants in a community that has historically suffered from poor air quality due to dense car and truck traffic. So it's framed as an environmental and a social equity win.
Furthermore, their commitment to clean power infrastructure is deeply structural. It's not just about the trains.
Not at all. They plan not just to power the trains, but to generate surplus power from solar and wind facilities. This surplus energy can then be stored in batteries or fed directly into the regional electrical grid.
So it supports the surrounding communities.
Exactly. Providing clean energy support for hospitals, schools, especially in those rural Central Valley areas. The rail line is presented as a grid enhancement project, not just a train line.
But if we look through the lens of the architect of conspiracy, we have to look past the environmental and social justification and trace the money pipeline.
Always follow the money.
$54.4 billion cannot be funded by future ticket sales alone, especially given the history of delays and cost overruns. We need to examine the systemic financial plan, the unseen revenues that actually justify such a massive, long-term, fixed investment.
So the funding mechanism relies heavily on what California calls the Cap and Invest program. This is crucial.
Right.
Cap and Invest is California's primary mechanism for carbon pricing. It's a system that caps the total amount of greenhouse gases that can be emitted and requires polluting businesses to obtain allowances through auctions or the market.
And here is the genius of the financial structure. The state legislature has proposed extending this cap and invest program through 2045. This extension is designed to provide at least $15 billion in additional secured funding for the rail project, bringing the total capital funding to over $43 billion.
So the green justification isn't just moral, it's literally the project's main financial lifeline, paid for by the state's polluting industries.
That's the structural incentive. Polluters fund the solution. But the real structural genius lies in asset commercialization, the ancillary revenues completely separate from passenger fares.
This is where the CHSR project transforms from a simple rail line into a giant, subsidized, multi-use network.
Okay, so first, they're commercializing fiber optics. They own the entire right-of-way along the corridor. They're installing massive fiber optic cables and plan to lease capacity to major telecommunications carriers, data centers, and internet service providers. This isn't just a train line, it's a high-speed data corridor connecting the Central Valley to the tech hubs of the Bay Area and Southern California.
Just think about the market value of that. Owning a continuous, secure, geographically diverse data corridor is immensely valuable to companies needing high-capacity, low-latency transport for massive data packets.
Financial trading data, streaming service backends.
Anything. The physical infrastructure of the railway becomes a passive, lucrative data asset.
Okay, second, express cargo.
Right. They have baked in a medium scenario revenue assumption of $11.25 per item of cargo.
Which is pretty specific.
Very specific. And this assumes they will utilize one dedicated train car operating 15 times daily, 300 days a year. This transforms the rail system into a critical logistics network, capitalizing on the speed of the high-speed line to deliver high-value, time-sensitive goods.
Pharmaceuticals, specialized tech components, fast fashion.
Things that planes and trucks can't handle reliably on that massive of a scale.
And finally, real estate and advertising. They're projecting billboard revenue of up to $50,000 per month in prime locations along the corridor.
And that's not even the big one.
No. More significantly, they anticipate major revenue from station naming rights. The analogy they use is the San Francisco Transbay Transit Center, which commanded around $4.4 million per year for its naming rights.
So if you multiply that naming rights revenue across multiple major metropolitan and Central Valley stations over, say, a 20-year period.
The return on investment from just real estate and advertising alone starts to justify tens of millions, if not billions, in upfront capital costs.
So this infrastructure project is fundamentally a massive, subsidized real estate and logistics data network masquerading as climate mobility.
And we can see the desperate measures they're taking right now to protect the financial integrity of the plan. To manage these huge cost increases, they implemented what they call DCM revisions.
The design and construction management.
Right. And the most significant one was lowering the maximum design speed from 250 miles per hour down to 220.
Which sounds minor to a layman, but its structural implications are enormous. It allows them to reduce the guideway width, shorten platform length, and decrease the size and cross-section of massive viaducts.
All of which lowers the necessary earthwork, materials, and complexity of construction in seismic zones.
Which saves hundreds of millions of dollars right now to meet a financial target that's nearly 15 years away.
They are making physical compromises today to protect a financial model that is predicated not on passenger fares, but on fiber leases and cargo volume in 2038.
That is the architecture of the future mobility they're building. It's about data and logistics, not just people. The moment you place the CHSR project in a global context, the contradictions between its environmental justification and its financial reality, they just explode.
Yeah. California's estimated cost per mile is around $212 million.
Which is dramatically higher than comparable high-speed rail projects anywhere else in the world.
Look at the comparisons. Taiwan's high-speed rail cost roughly $134 million per mile, and China's famed Beijing-Shanghai line was built for about $61 million per mile.
So California is paying 2 to 3 times the global average for comparable infrastructure.
So what's the official explanation?
Well, the authorities' line for this massive discrepancy lists challenges unique to California. They cite the need to navigate complex wetlands, extreme seismic zones, massive labor costs, and, critically, the sheer legislative complexity imposed by CEQ and NEPA.
Okay, this is a critical point that needs a quick definition. CEQA, the California Act, and NEPA, the federal act. They're the twin behemoths of environmental review.
Right. They mandate exhaustive studies on every potential impact, from noise pollution to water runoff to habitat destruction, and they create endless avenues for litigation and regulatory delays.
And that litigation is what drives up the cost and timeline.
Exactly. The authority itself is now recommending streamlined regulatory authority for environmental permitting to accelerate timelines and reduce these specific costs, particularly for the clean power interconnection facilities.
Wait a minute. So the state is saying we must build this green transportation system by 2038 to save the climate, but simultaneously admitting that the very environmental regulations meant to protect the state are the main barrier to timely and affordable completion.
It's a deep cognitive dissonance at the project's core. The internal struggle is undeniable.
And that struggle is amplified by the fact that the consumer is actively rejecting the premise of slow, fixed infrastructure right now.
Right now.
Despite this colossal long-term bet on rail, the global air and sea travel industries are absolutely booming, betting on explosive, flexible, high-volume growth.
We're seeing massive seat capacity expansion across the Asia-Pacific, the Middle East, and Europe. American Airlines is actively expanding its European routes to culturally rich cities like Budapest and Prague.
And Etihad is launching new routes to places like Kazakhstan and Georgia, which are destinations focused entirely on that cultural immersion archetype we talked about earlier.
And then there's mass cruising, which is the other monolithic competitor.
Oh, yeah.
Cruise capacity is expected to hit 37.7 million passengers by 2025, which represents a stunning 25% increase above 2019 levels.
So millions of people are betting on large, expensive, multi-day fixed-route leisure travel, but they're doing it now. And they're doing it via the sea, not a fixed rail line.
Which leads us to the hollow language surrounding green mobility. The word sustainability is risking becoming this empty buzzword used to justify raising prices.
For sure. We're seeing climate-focused fees rising globally, Hawaii's new green fee, a 0.75% tax, and Greece's climate crisis fee, which is up to €20 a night on popular islands.
And travelers are willing to pay, but they are demanding radical transparency on where that money is actually going.
And the most opaque area of all is the carbon offset system, which is fundamentally tied to that cap and invest funding mechanism we discussed.
This is where the unseen financial machinery gets complex and often, frankly, cynical. The structural flaw is that the system incentivizes volume over quality control. Retail traders are pressured to supply abundant carbon credits, often compromising the legitimacy of those credits just to maximize sales.
The structural flaw lies with the certifiers and developers. These certifiers are not government agencies. They're private entities that profit directly from the volume of certifications they issue.
Which creates an immediate incentive for them to set minimal standards just to maximize their own earnings. I mean, this isn't necessarily corruption. It's a perverse structural incentive.
We see this played out in the mechanism of monetizing threats. A landowner, often in a developing region, might threaten deforestation or logging activity.
The developer then steps in and issues carbon credits for saving the forest, even if the threat was potentially manufactured or exaggerated, or if the land was already under protection.
So the system is designed to profit from the appearance of environmental action.
Often monetizing future non-events. Exactly.
Okay, let's connect this back to the consumer. The spontaneous traveler who just fled the cynicism of Vegas is now encountering the same cynicism in the green travel market.
And they are demanding immediate trust signals, which is why the marketing industry is experiencing an allostasis change.
Allostasis. We used that earlier. It's a biological concept meaning an irreversible adaptation, usually driven by massive environmental stress.
And the marketing industry is experiencing this due to AI and the total fracturing of consumer attention. Traditional funnels are breaking because searches are distributed across TikTok and AI engines, rapidly reducing the market share of established search engines.
So what wins now is trust, built through authentic stories, community engagement, and genuine voices. The old way mass advertising on fixed channels, it's dying.
And this is the profound disconnection. The infrastructure systems, CHSR, mass cruising, are demanding we move slowly and expensively on their fixed 15-year terms, relying on 20th century traffic patterns.
Meanwhile, the consumer is demanding immediate, high-trust, personalized experiences planned spontaneously via AI search and TikTok. And this consumer is the remote worker, the ultimate flexible traveler.
The share of remote workers who reported traveling for an extended period has skyrocketed from 13% just a few years ago to 51% by mid-2025.
That's a huge shift.
They're traveling closer to departure, favoring shorter, more frequent getaways, and increasingly choosing destinations outside the urban core that CHSR is designed to connect.
They have abandoned the 20th century model of movement, the 9-to-5 commute, and the 2-week annual vacation.
So this is a battle for the customer funnel, where the consumer prioritizes radical freedom and immediate reality. The monolithic infrastructure is built on the opposite: fixed, centralized, and funded by opaque ancillary revenues, relying on a future version of human migration that may never materialize.
So we have watched the collision of two opposing forces today. On one side, you have the monolithic state infrastructure project, California's $54.4 billion bet, justified by climate promises and entirely dependent on capturing data, fiber, and cargo revenue over the next 2 decades.
A bet on structural rigidity.
And on the other side, we have the radical, decentralized consumer. This traveler deeply distrusts corporate systems like the one collapsing in Vegas, and they actively question the greenwashing evident in the carbon offset market.
They demand immediate authenticity, whether that's deep cultural immersion in Cusco or total judgment-free abandonment in a resort dedicated to psychological liberation.
It's a bet on spontaneous freedom. So let's bring the architecture back to the question of power and structure. If California's high-speed rail is betting $54.4 billion that we will need fast, expensive trains to connect major urban hubs to the Central Valley by 2038, who has calculated the exponential growth of remote work.
And who has accounted for the decentralized population centers that may already be leaving the high-cost urban core right now.
Right.
They're working from places that this fixed rail system was never designed to serve, destinations that prioritize quality of life and low cost over proximity to a train station.
Are we, as a society, funding the mobility of the past? Because if the ultimate escape is no longer primarily physical, if the desire for psychological liberation completely overtakes the need for physical proximity, and people can achieve that liberation and authenticity in Havana or the romping shop without buying into a monolithic system.
Does any amount of track or cement truly matter? The most profound insight into the future isn't in the construction reports or the tourist trends. It's in the silence. It's the absence of information about what happens when the traveler realizes the infrastructure they need is internal, not external.
That is the core of the unseen narrative that the builders and the planners are ignoring. This episode is powered by Neon Core Media for stories they said were too real to tell.